My guest in the studio for this morning is Mark McCaighey, who is a little bit of an aficionado. He's written books and he's done comedy programs for radio, and he is talking about Dad's Army and the filming, particularly about focusing on what happened in Norfolk. Very good morning to you, Mark.
Good morning, Phil.
Welcome along. We wanted to find something with a bit of a local theme about it today, and so we just about make a little incursion over the Thetford, Norfolk border, actually, with Norfolk and Suffolk, just into the town of Thetford. It was the scene of much television activity in the summer months, with a wonderful cast.
That's right. It was chosen for two reasons, really. Firstly, when the series began in 1968, it started in April, and the producer, David Croft, wanted somewhere with plenty of evergreen because the scripts were set in the summertime. And secondly, he also wanted to film undisturbed, and the big battle area at Stamford near Thetford was ideal for that purpose.
Yeah, they've got an acronym, isn't it, for that area? Is it called the Stanta area, which I think even today the Army does exercises, the British Army in that area.
That's right, yeah.
Stanta. I'm not quite sure what the acronym stands for, but I guess it's Stanta as in Stanford.
Well, I think the Stant comes from Stanford and TA is from training area.
I was going to say Territorial Army, but training area would probably be the one, wouldn't it? Because the regulars are trained there as well. Do you know if Jimmy Perry and David Croft actually knew the area, or was it sort of advised? Did somebody do some research for them?
It was Harold Snow, the production manager at the time, who found it for them. He was responsible for finding suitable locations when the TV series started, and it was a difficult and time-consuming task, but it was all part of his job to find locations called for in the making of the series. When it came to Dad's Army, the main requirement was for an area they could use freely and without problems of members of the public putting in an appearance in the back of shot in the middle of a take. So, in other words, they needed somewhere private, especially with a show that called for a large degree of location work. It occurred to Harold that a suitable place might well be an area under the control of the Military of Defence. So with this in mind, he contacted the MOD, who were very helpful. And one of their suggestions didn't appeal to him because it seemed that it was used rather too often for military manoeuvres. So he decided to visit the other one, the Stamford Practical Training Area near Thetford, and was given the contact of the CO, which was Colonel Cleasby Thompson.
Love it.
I know, you get the double barrel names. And on the 5th of March 1968, he drove down there and immediately knew that it would be ideal. Not only was there some lovely countryside, but there was some proper roads, which would pass as public roads, had originally been public roads anyway. And there was also various buildings which had originally been part of a small hamlet, but which had then been taken over by the MOD when they acquired the whole area, including cottages and a church. Some of the buildings had suffered somewhat, having been used for target practice. So on the whole, there were enough left to provide most of what they needed. There was also a river with gates that allowed them to flood the surrounding areas. That came useful in the 1970 episode, A Parade, when filming Pike's rescue from a bog.
We're not talking about a toilet.
No, it's a swamp, more like. The CO was extremely helpful to them, give them a free hand, anything they needed. Harold would liaise on a daily basis to ensure they weren't using an area that they were planning to use, and vice versa.
Yeah, and also the area of Bregland I know very well. My grandfather used to farm in that area, so it's a very sandy area. It's riddled with rabbit warrens. Hopefully none of the senior members of the cast actually disappeared or broke their ankles trudging around some of the area while doing all of this. There was one episode where Mannering takes his team to play cricket as well. So that was on a pitch near Santon Downham, which is a very popular area as well of that part of Norfolk. So it's really the area we call Breckland, isn't it? It's kind of bordering with Suffolk.
That's right.
And over those years, from 1968 up until the series' demise. The cast are really very old by 1977.
Yeah, they just about got the last series out of them.
Actually, by then, in fact, a couple of members of the cast sadly had died, though, hadn't they?
Well, James Becker died in 1973, aged 44. The rest of them were just about hung on there, but it wasn't like too many years afterwards, really, because Edward Sinclair, who played the Ferger, he died about 6 months after the last scene was filmed in the last episode. And in 1980, John Norrie died. 82, Arthur Lowe. 83, John Le Mesurier. 84, Arnold Ridley.
Sad to see them all go, isn't it? Obviously, we know that Ian Lavender's still very much alive, but of course he was the youngest member of the cast.
He was.
Any of the others still survive to this day, Mark?
Frank Williams, who played the vicar.
Reverend Timothy Farthing.
Ian Lavender and Frank both appeared in the new Dad's Army movie.
Cameo role, or
Well, Frank played a small role as the vicar again, and Ian Lavender did a small role as a brigadier.
So they used Thetford, and so they would come each summer. They'd be put into the town and using various locations, most of which are still surviving.
That's
and
right.
the Bell makes a big thing of it. The Bell Hotel in Bridge Street in Thetford, right in the centre of town, a pretty part of Thetford, I have to say, in the centre of Thetford, is where they would sort of sit. Arthur Lowe would come down from his bedroom,
That's right.
sup his gin or whatever it was. He like a tipple in the evenings.
He wasn't too easy a resident for the hotel staff, really.
Oh, really?
I think he was a bit pompous and fussy and...
Be driven to location, wouldn't he, after the rest of the cast had disappeared in the bus. There's a recent, of course, BBC drama based around Dad's Army, which has been shown separate from the new Dad's Army film on television, which seemed to indicate he would sort of want to rather leave in his own time after breakfast.
Yeah.
And it was always a full English cooked breakfast for Arthur as well in the morning.
And Jimmy Perry would give him a lift, but then, as you see in the play, it kind of stopped up, really. But,
yes, unfortunately, we'll be careful what we say on the radio here, but Arthur would, his constitution would get rather, shall we say, stuck.
Yes.
After
I think
all
that's
these...
what held him back from catching the coach for the others, really. Was that, really, yeah.
I don't know whether they needed sometimes to use to go behind the bushes or something and scrub them on the Brecklands, actually, between cuts and breaks. But also, there was in those days the cinema in Thetford, and it was used, wasn't it? At the end of
the Palace Cinema was used to see the rushes, to see the filming at the end of each day. They would march down there and have a look at that. That's in Thetford, it's Palace Cinema, yes.
The old Palace Cinema,
that's right,
which is now a certain bingo hall. It still survives. A magnolia-coloured, very sort of Art Deco-y building. And you should say the rushes were, they processed, presumably they must have somewhere locally where they could process the film.
I think they were sent to London and came back from London.
So you had a courier motorbike or something to get them back up the old A11.
That's right, and of course the Anchor Hotel, as you mentioned, that's no longer around, unfortunately. That was demolished 2012 due to safety concerns. The hotel was closed in 2006 as the Breckland District Council, who owned it, wanted to redevelop the site. There had been an inn, hotel or pub on that site for about 500 years, but unfortunately the building wasn't listed, despite its history. That hotel actually featured in the opening scene of the very first episode, The Man and the Hour, in 1968. They used one of the function rooms.
There have been quite a few documentaries, and it's known quite well, really, the interaction of the cast that would come down and have quite a few drinks at the bar in the evenings.
That's
after.
Right. They'd have a convivial evening, I'd say.
And first of all, apparently, the atmosphere was rather, shall we say, stiff and... a little bit charged between some members of the cast until they really got used to each other. I think it was said that Arthur Lowe and John Le Mesurier took them a while to, shall we say, gel together.
Yes, I think that's true enough. It took a little while. I mean, they had worked together before previously on episodes of Pardon the Expression in the mid-60s. John Le Mesurier and Clive Dunn, of course, were good friends, so there was no problem with them. They would travel down to London. A coach was laid on at the BBC Television Centre at Wood Lane to accommodate anyone who wasn't driving up to Norfolk. Some took their own cars and others took the train from Liverpool Street Station, changing at Ely. John and Clive would travel together on a Sunday morning and stopping for lunch on the way. And the production crew, which is cameramen, lighting and sound technicians and special effects department, would have all gone up earlier. And they would arrive at the Bell Hotel, where booking in was a noisy, bustling affair. And the wardrobe department had to get the costumes out of the caravan and had previously arrived from London, towed by Land Rovers. A room was set aside at the hotel for use of the wardrobe department and the makeup girls. Jimmy Perry would bring his well-worn medicine chest, which included indigestion tablets, Aspro, throat spray, senna pods, diarrhea tablets, malaria pills, snake bite ointment.
Malaria pills and snake bite? I mean, there might be the odd adder. Malaria?
I know. And a selection of plasters, splints, and a spare set of false teeth, should they be needed.
Mark, also, one of the things that happened is they went up to North Norfolk on location, and they were ending up at Weybourne Railway Station. At that time, it was on a preserved line, it still is today, the North Norfolk Steam Railway, which runs up there. And it was for one episode in 1973 called The Royal Train.
That's right, yes. That episode is a particular favourite of Frank Williams, who played the Reverend Timothy Farvey. And he remembers The episode contains some classic moments like Pike's insistence on having his turn of the Tommy gun, or Wilson's ineffectual search for a red carpet, or Manring going down the train looking for the king and his subsequent heroic climb along the roof of the train with the ever-loyal Corporal Jones assisting him. There was a crisis occurred perilously close to Frank Williams and Bill Pertwee, because they were on one of those kind of truck things.
Yeah, one of these pump trolley things.
In one scene where it's chasing after the train.
Sort of thing you'd see in an old Charlie Chaplin movie,
right.
when they did a comedy being chased by a steam train or something.
When they were filming that, it was a bit worrying for them, because at one point the train seemed to be getting perilously close to them. When they went short, the driver could see them, and Bill Pertwee, who played Warden Hodges, suggested if they got any nearer, they'd be advised to jump clear. At the speed they were going, it was clearly not a realistic option though, but in the end, of course, all was well. Train driver may not have been able to see them, but he had a walkie-talkie communication with the director, who from his vantage point behind the camera could see everything, and so they emerged unscathed.
Survived to tell the tale without being run over by a steam train.
And in the final scene, in which the platoon are all drenched with water from a speeding train, so it was initially filmed on location but didn't quite work, so when they saw the results back at Television Centre, they decided to reshoot that scene. Instead of travelling back to Norfolk, they painted a background like the railway carriage they're all standing against, and one by one, in close-up, they threw a bucket of water in their faces. So it was recorded in someone's back garden and worked quite well, apparently.
And other locations around, a lot of people don't realise, actually, he shot in places like Norfolk Broads. It was an episode called Don't Forget the Diver.
That's right,
in 1970. Also in Suffolk at the Drinkston Windmill, Bardwell, Bressingham, Brandon, Santon Downham, as we've mentioned as well, Oxborough, the wonderful Oxborough Hall, which is just on the Suffolk-Norfolk border as well. They did a museum piece there in 1968, Weeting, near Brandon as well. Great Yarmouth. They actually did some location external scenes there as well, right, and Lowestoft too. So a lot of parts of different parts of Norfolk, just around Thetford itself, but just to get some external shots of buildings and things like that, were taken all around Norfolk. Today, there is a museum in Thetford that everyone can go along and enjoy. The Dad's Army Museum.
That's right. It's in Cage Lane in Thetford. It's got a cafe there called the Marigold Tea Rooms, which is obviously in honour of the Marigold Tea Rooms in Warmington-on-Sea.
I remember the episode where Arthur Lowe goes in there, and which is rather sweet actually, he sort of, although he's married to Elizabeth, who we never meet in the original TV series, he meets, shall we say, as a little sort of ships that pass in the night with a lady. That's right,
Mrs. Grey, in
Grey.
The episode Mom's Army, which was kind of a brief encounter type of episode, really.
And you feel actually quite sorry for Captain Mannering, really, because obviously in his bank manager's suit at that time, because it never quite worked out. You think,
I know. You do feel sorry for him. It was a kind of a different episode, and I think it's one of David Croft's favourite ones.
And so you've written a couple of books. You love your comedy.
Yes,
you love particularly your British comedy. Mark, give you a minute just to sort of kind of plug what you do and get your books on the air.
Okay, I have a couple of ebooks. One is called the Dad's Army Movie Dossier, which is about the making of the original Dad's Army movie in 1971. Another book is Dad's Army: The Man and the Hour, which features 10 quizzes on specially selected episodes. The episodes have been selected by the writers and the cast. It also features trivia about each of the episodes as well.
That's great. Thank you so much. Where can you find them online? So if they're ebooks...
Amazon or any of the sites that sell the ebooks.
And you can find it there. Search for Mark McCaighey.
That's right.
Yeah. It's wonderful for you to recall those memories of what happened in Norfolk during the 1970s and those days. And of course, even today, we're still enjoying that very much on the TV. Thanks.
Thank you, Phil.